Thank you. Lisa Graustein is a lifelong friend, teacher, facilitator, and artist. She was highly active in the Young Friends, first as a participant in high school and then as a staff member and coordinator for over a decade. Lisa has served as a representative and board member for YouthQuake, Friends United Meeting, right sharing of world resources, and other Quaker organizations. She is also a facilitator for Beyond Diversity 101, the Quaker Coalition for Uprooting Racism, and the Pendle Hill Pamphlet Committee. Additionally, Lisa co-founded Three Rivers, an explicitly queer and Christian semi-programmed monthly meeting that aims to reclaim and reinterpret Quaker practices for contemporary needs. Her daily work centers on equity, justice, and liberation in schools, nonprofits, and foundations. Lisa, Lisa lives on the homelands of the Neponset Band of the Massachusetts, which is in Boston, with her teenage son. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. Let's try it again. Good morning, friends.
Good
Yes,
morning.
there we go. I know California can be more friendly than Boston. Thank you, Erin. So as Erin said, my name is Lisa Graustein. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm the co-clerk of Three Rivers Meeting. We're a meeting that was set to start 2 weeks after the pandemic lockdown began. So we only meet online. And if you had told me at any point in my life that I would be a Quaker who worshiped online, I would have said no, but I am. And the way we start our online worship is by taking a moment to connect with our bodies. So I'm going to invite everyone to do like your little wiggle you need to do, maybe a little stretch, maybe straighten your spine a little bit. And the other thing we do because we meet on Zoom is we invite each other to send a silent greeting to everybody else. So I invite you to turn, to send a greeting, to just look into the eyes of somebody else in the space or on the screens. Thank you. I'm also going to invite you, as it works for your body, to put your feet flat on the surface that they're on. Maybe bring a little bit more length to your spine and to just take a moment to breathe. And to just breathe at the rate and depth that is good for you. So I come to you this morning, as Erin said, from the Neponset Band of the Massachusetts homelands in what's known as Boston. My great-great-grandparents came here to California as part of the gold rush and settled on Ohlone and Miwok land. Much of my extended family lives in the region of your yearly meeting. I also come to you this morning as a lifelong Quaker who grew up in a very multi-faith family and community. I had a Catholic mother, a Quaker father, went to an Episcopal school, lived in a Jewish Orthodox neighborhood, and the extended family with whom I spent all my holidays and vacation were Hindu and Buddhist. So I come by my Universalist theology very honestly and very experientially. I come to you this morning as someone who spent almost all of my adult life as a public school teacher and a youth worker. You'll notice this in how I share what I'm sharing this morning. There will not be a quiz. You do not have to take notes, but it will be useful. I'm starting with gratitude. My gratitude for Robin for inviting me. My gratitude to Elaine, Laura, and Erin for being my elders and accompanying me. My gratitude to Melody and Hillary for being my elders back home. And my gratitude to Three Rivers Meeting for spiritually grounding me. I also want to offer my gratitude to all of you for welcoming me, into your community. I want to offer you three things this morning. First, I want to offer an orientation to how we can be during this time we're living in. Second, I want to offer a framework for navigating transformation, because there's a lot of things we got to transform right now. And third, I want to offer you a query that has never failed me. While I'm doing this plenary, there'll be 2 times to talk with friends near you. And for friends who are accessing this via Zoom, you'll have an option to join a breakout room. This is being recorded, and I'm happy to share the slide deck with anybody afterwards. I'm going to have slides up the whole time. There will be a few blank slides. I talk really quickly, so I have Laura sitting here to whack me when I get going too fast. If I get going too fast, you are welcome to shout back to me too fast, and I will slow it down. When Robin asked me months ago for the title and description of this talk, I thought I was going to speak to you about archetypal Quaker roles, spiritual gifts, and how we use those to build community and resist empire. But when I met with my elders and listened to what is moving in your yearly meeting, it was clear that I was called to talk about transformation. I'm delighted to talk about the other topic over meals or other times this week. So I threw out my first draft I'd prepared, but I kept the title of A Good Crossing. And let me explain what I mean by that. The time we are living in is a time of great revealing, disintegration, and choice, both within the religious society of Friends and as a nation. I'll be making some references to national events, but hope to do so in a way that is not graphic or triggering. Among Friends, we are seeing splintering and conflict, a contracting of our communities, and the continued loss of our young people, though way to represent young Friends this week. We're also seeing an increase in folks new to Friends. We sit in the daily tension of some among us longing to go back to the way things were, and others among us yearning for the way things could be. All of this is within the larger context of an increase in the blatant expressions of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism playing out across our nation. It's a lot. And times of great upheaval and disruption are, as Arundhati Roy offers us, portals. They are opportunities to leap ahead to new futures and possibilities. So how do we do this? How do we find a good crossing to a better future? Most mornings for the last 28 years, I walk a 4-mile loop through my urban neighborhood and along the Neponset River. Neponset in Massachusetts means the place of good crossing. The Neponset River, with its gentle falls and estuary, has sustained millennia of Massachusetts people. I live near the point in the river where it meets the ocean, a tidal estuary, birthplace and resting place for hundreds of species. Walking along this river most days, I get to witness the abundance of life, the cycle of the seasons, and the flow of the waters. In the hours just before high tide, the river flows in 2 directions at once. The river waters are flowing out to sea, while the sea waters are flowing upriver. The central part of the river is moving into the Atlantic, and the sides of the river are flowing upstream. I want to offer this reality of a river flowing in 2 directions at once as an orientation for how we can live during this time. What becomes possible when we can hold both despair and hope at the same time? What can we do when there is space for grief and possibility at the same time? What will our Quaker communities look like when we can honor the good parts of what has been and move towards more faithful realities? There is so much to grieve right now. Every time I sat down to work on this plenary, I had to turn off my internet, cry for the things that had happened in just the last 24 hours, and then pray into what could be. I had to feel all the ways the violence of our nation was landing in my body, and I had to ask Spirit to strengthen my sense of possibility and capacity. If I deny my feelings, I become unhealthy and increasingly disconnected. If I deny possibility, and a better future, evil's already won. But when I allow myself to flow in two directions at once, to mourn and cry and to vision and create, then I am whole, grounded, and moving at my full capacity. As friends, we believe the divine has offered us heaven here and now, not when we die. As friends, we believe the divine has offered us heaven here and now, not when we die. We have much work to do to make this heaven on earth that Spirit gives us. Our faithful task then is to find the place of good crossing from the reality we are in to the one that God holds for us. Our job as friends is to flow in two directions at once, to acknowledge what is and has been, and to work tenaciously for what Spirit promises us. And so now I'm going to ask you in a moment, if you are in the room, to find one or two people. Do not make a group of 4 or 5. You can split them up, keep them smaller. If you're on Zoom, you'll be moved to a breakout room. And the invitation is to share with each other what are two seemingly disparate things I or we need to hold at the same time, or what has felt bound up, held back, or denied that needs to be acknowledged. You're only going to have about 4 or 5 minutes, so just a short answer. And if you're someone who would like to stay quiet during this time, we're great at holding space for being quiet. So I invite you to turn to 1 or 2 other people and share. Great, thank you. Thank you. So thank you, friends. I know I cut that conversation short. We're at the beginning of our week, so there's much time to talk and share. I want to hear a little bit of what you shared. I'm going to call on a few people to share. I'll repeat what they say so we don't have to worry about the mics. Is there somebody who wants to share a way that you're flowing in two directions at once, or two disparate things that you're holding that we could hear? Thank you. So sense of holding urgency and the Quaker practice of slowing down, an attentive process. We need both. We need both. Thank you. Yes, and I forgot to ask for pretty concise sharing. Thank you. The balance of being with the hard, difficult things and making space and time to be and with joy. Urgency and slowness, being with grief and hard things and joy. Let's hear one more. Friend in the turquoise top.
So I shared about, I loved what you shared in terms of being grounded in the morning. And I feel like today I'm not as grounded as I'd like to be. And so when it was time for introductions, I held back. But there's some very exciting things happening around the housing justice and racial justice work with reparations in our city and hundreds of affordable units happening. And all that is through our Quaker Peace and Social Concerns Committee. But now I got to say it, and I'm here only for today. So if anybody wants to talk to me, I'd love to hear what you're doing. But thank you.
So holding back and making space and stepping forward and moving forward and taking space, right? Being within and being without. Either in this sharing or in your partners, how many of you heard someone say something that resonated with you? Okay, so we're not alone in holding these things.
Okay.
Again, take a moment to notice your breath, put a little length in your spine, put your shoulders back, get big. So this is the first thing that I want to offer you this morning. How can we hold two seemingly opposite things at the same time and use that to find a way through to a better reality? I believe actively holding contradictions, really embodying and actually feeling our feelings, and directly engaging in conflict are all core to our faith tradition. Listening for the divine and then doing what Spirit asks of us is not easy nor uncomplicated work. Over many years, the Religious Society of Friends has often confused quietness, conformity, intellectualization, and exhaustive deference to process for faithfulness. Those things are not faithfulness. But Quakerism started as a radical, fully embodied faith that was not concerned with convention, but with truth-telling. Let me say that again. Quakerism started as a radical faith. God speaks directly to each person. We are supposed to minister to each other, practice equality, and buck any socially held convention that is not aligned with that. Woo! Let's get some more of that in the world. Okay? Quakerism started as a fully embodied faith. We literally shake with the power of God when we are called to speak. We show our faith in how we live our lives and carry ourselves. And early friends did some of the most radical, out there, naked in the street theater. I'm not making that up. There's no hyperbole in that. Friends also healed each other with the laying on of hands. I've been a Quaker for 51 years, and it was 6 months ago that I learned that George Fox was a faith healer. Anyone know how many documented cases of healing George Fox did in his lifetime? Let me just take a guess. Somebody throw out a number. 40? 171. Okay? That man was praying the Spirit into people's bodies and healing them. That's in our origins. We can call down the power of Spirit and heal things that are wounded. Oh, let's do that. And Quakerism started as a faith tradition that was not concerned with convention, but with truth-telling. We called out two of the biggest lies about power of the day. One, that clergy were the only people who could speak to God. And two, that social status meant anything. We were pretty mixed when it came to gender, and we got it woefully wrong when it came to race. We did not tell the truth about everything, but we did tell the truth about some things. I am not holding up early friends as whom we should model ourselves after. Rather, I am reaching into our origins for the parts that will most serve us today. So let me be really clear about that. I'm not holding up early friends because that's who we should be. I'm reaching into our origins for the things that will most serve us today. We need to reclaim much of that energy and ways of being and moving. The way we are living, both as a religious society and as a nation, is simply not sustainable, and it is not faithful. I don't believe that this version of liberal, unprogrammed Quakerism that we're a part of is going to survive this century unless we make some radically different changes. And I don't even want to imagine what this nation will look like in a few years unless we stop this current regime. The big spiritual struggle I had in preparing the plenary today was in doing what was asked of me. Was I colluding with our continued complacency with the regime continuing? Or should we just go be out in the street and shutting some stuff down? I think we need to be doing both. And I hope what I'm offering allows you to do what you need to do here this week to tend your own house so that next week we are all in the street shutting it down. For reals. Okay, so how do we do this, right? Let's get practical. We've got one piece. We're going to practice flowing in two directions at once, feeling our feelings, holding contradiction, being embodied. I want to now offer the second piece that I'm bringing this morning. It's a bit more intellectual, but it's also something we can fully feel in our bodies. This is a framework and tool to help us navigate transformation. Transformation is bigger, deeper, and fundamentally more lasting than change. Change can be incremental or partial. It can be good or bad. It may or may not last. Transformation is bringing a new reality into being such that going back to the old reality becomes impossible. Okay? Transformation means what has been happening cannot happen again. We need transformation now. One of my greatest teachers and dearest friends is Neonu Span, a Quaker from the Philadelphia area. Most of what I have learned about how to do deep, spirit-guided transformational work has come from Nionu and the communities she creates.
Okay.
One of the many tools she's developed is elements of a transformative process. This is a way of understanding how deep transformation happens and how to navigate it. I'm going to walk through this framework with Nionu's express permission, using early friends and myself as some examples. So this starts with a dissatisfaction with the current reality. George Fox was really dissatisfied with the current reality. It wasn't working for him. He was spiritually unfulfilled and knew, even before his vision on Pendle Hill, that something more nourishing and accessible was possible. I grew up in a house where queerness was not allowed and did not exist. I didn't know any openly out people till I was well into high school, and I could not imagine a reality in which I could be the woman that I actually am. In my late teens and early 20s, this was, my increasing awareness around this was dissatisfying, to say the least. The next part of this framework are the dual motivations for transformation. On one hand, we're propelled by an unbearable now. We are living in an unbearable now. George Fox, his now was so unbearable, he got up and left behind everything he knew. And the big and, we have to be propelled by a compelling vision on the other side. I had to end the lies of straightness that were put on me and claim an identity and future that allowed the fullness of myself to exist. George Fox had to get up and leave everything behind, go up on Pendle Hill and have his vision of a great people to be gathered, and one even Christ Jesus who could speak to his condition. Transformation is about both the things we have to end and the things that have to be brought into life, what can't continue and what must come forth. These two motivations require different actions. If we simply end a way of being without a clear vision, we just replicate what we've been doing under some different words, right? Any of us who've ever worked at a nonprofit have experienced this. Probably some other kinds of workplaces too. And if we just lean into new ways of being and a vision without undoing what's not been working, we bring those ways with us and they replicate themselves. We must do both. So the unbearable now must be dismantled, upset, and destructured. We can't ignore it or just walk away from it. We need to actively and consciously work to take it apart. Early friends named many of the conventions of their time that were out of order with their understanding of Jesus's teachings. They did this by interrupting traditional church services, refusing to doff their hats, having separate men's and women's business meetings, and a myriad of other ways. I did this by coming out, by no longer lying about who I was. I dismantled the lie of who I'd been told I could be, upsetting any number of expectations in several relationships. The current regime in our nation is doing this at an alarming pace, and with so much chaos that we are becoming numb to the rate at which they are dismantling the systems that protect people and ecosystems. The other half of this, that is the compelling vision, must be affirmed, activated, and positioned. Early friends strove to live in ways aligned with Jesus's teachings. Margaret Fell, the other founder of Quakerism, did so much of this activating work. She created the space and support networks and infrastructure for the vision of friends to be manifest. She stepped into a spiritual position of authority and eldering that women in her country did not hold at that time. Margaret Fell held the vision of friends and used her significant skills and resources to affirm, activate, and position Quakerism to thrive and grow. And here's the other thing I learned this year about Margaret Fell and early friends. So at this time, right, 1650s England, a lot of landless people who are broke wandering the countryside. Margaret Fell's partner at the time was a judge, so they lived in a pretty fancy manor, had resources. So people who are wandering the countryside and hungry would go to the back door of manors, ask for some food, sometimes get it, and then be on their way. At Margaret Fell's house, they would knock on the back door. A cook or another domestic laborer would feed them and send them on their way. Margaret Fell didn't interact with them. The night before George Fox shows up, she has a dream that God is going to send her a man in a white hat that she's supposed to invite in and listen to and work with. So she wakes up from this dream and she's paying attention, and she sees a man in a white hat, which was not a common color of hat back then, walking down the road. So instead of having her cook give him some food and send him on the way, she invites him in. Quakerism was founded in part because women believed in their dreams. And early Friends took dreams seriously. Marcel Martin has a pamphlet coming out shortly that documents numerous cases of Friends having prophetic dreams and then acting in unusual and weird ways to live into those dreams. I did this affirming, activating, and positioning by coming out, by building chosen family, by finding queer community, by joining activist groups and claiming my full identity. The current regime is also enacting their vision for our collective future. And there are myriad examples in every day's news of what that looks like. I'll not name them here, but they are all terrifying to me. When Friends only moved from one of these motivations, we made change, but we did not make lasting transformation. Abolitionist Friends were motivated to end slavery, but the Religious Society of Friends did not dismantle white supremacy, nor did they have a vision of true equality. Vanessa July and Donna McDaniel's extensive work, published in Fit for Freedom, Not for Friendship, details the many ways this lack of dismantling white supremacy and the lack of a vision of a truly equitable religious society of friends led to the continuance of white supremacy and racism among us. Fox preached a gospel of true divine equality, but failed to practice that equality. The founding of Quakerism was transformative, and Friends' unwillingness to let go of racism, sexism, ableism, and many other forms of systemic oppression means we must continue the work today of uprooting those oppressive ways of being from ourselves, our religious society, and the world around us. We must continue to dismantle these systems and work for equity, which we now understand is bigger and more complex than equality. This is the big, important, messy, faithful work before us. When we are clear on what needs to be dismantled and what we are building towards, that's when real transformation can happen. As you are doing your business and nurturing your community here this week, what needs to be dismantled and destructured? What do you need to affirm and activate? As you are doing your business and tending to your community this week, what needs to be dismantled and destructured? And what do you need to affirm and activate? This is easier said than done. And when we do this work of transformation, we can expect several things. The first is people are going to have big feelings and disorientation. Dismantling familiar ways of doing and thinking bring up these feelings. Activating new ways of being bring up these feelings. Early Friends' actions engendered all of these feelings. That's why so many early Friends ended up in prison. They freaked the people out around them. And these feelings came up among early Friends. We have the practice of membership because some of the first Quakers wanted the ability to say who was and wasn't a Quaker so they could deny some friends when their actions became too disruptive. Membership was not created for spiritual covenant, it was created for control. I'm a history teacher, so we can talk about that later. Coming out was terrifying for me. There were people dear to me who could not stay in a relationship with me once I came out. This was painful, confusing, and deeply disorienting to me and to them. As a nation, there is tremendous fear, confusion, and disorientation among us now. Resistance is also part of this dynamic. the bound energy that fear, confusion, and disorientation can bring. Among friends, resistance shows up in so many different ways. Direct opposition, calls for slowing down and silencing, questioning every decision and choice, bogging down in process, and undermining those leading transformation. Well, we can point to friends in each generation who maintain the radical, embodied, truth-speaking elements of our founding. Generally, the Religious Society of Friends became quieter, more inwardly focused, and deeply conflict avoidant. We were originally not a conflict avoidant people. We created the conflict and then waded right on into it. Some of the ways that our resistance shows up to our own transformation was through controlling the very ways that we had expressed that transformation, right? We went from conflict engaging to incredibly conflict avoidant. And in myself, even after years of being out, personally, publicly, professionally, I still find myself straightening up in certain moments. I notice some of my internal knee-jerk judgmental reactions to the younger generations of queer folks doing the further work of liberation. This is one of the ways that resistance shows up in me. But there is also new energy that gets released when bound up energy is finally expressed. This is the energy of creativity, the energy of speaking truth directly and clearly, the energy of clarity and faithful discernment. It's the energy of healing and of drawing people into a fuller, more inclusive and dynamic ways of being. In 1760 in New England, Quakerism was so dynamic that 5,000 people attended yearly meeting. And for reference, if we compare where that was happening in here, that would be more than 4 million people showing up to yearly meeting today. Okay? It was so on fire that they closed yearly meeting and friends stayed for 3 more days because they were so into what was happening, right? And this is where you're wearing wool in August and traveling by horse or by foot to get there and hoping somebody is feeding your pigs back home. It was a bigger commitment to get there. Quakerism was growing, and the released energy of our embodied, radical, truth-telling, direct relationship with the divine was so enticing that friends were exploding in numbers and significantly shaping the communities in which they were living. And all of us who have ever come out discovered just how much of our energy was going into being closeted and what becomes available when we can be our true selves. Several times in my life, while traveling or living in places where it was illegal to be queer, I've had to gone back to not being fully myself. It is so exhausting and dehumanizing. And a lesson for me in the privileges and realities of being queer where I am in this world. And any of us who participated in the resistance of Ferguson, Standing Rock, or Minneapolis, or myriad other places, or even just witnessed it, felt the power of that energy becoming unbound in new ways. So again, I want to invite us to lengthen our spines, take a deep breath, just be in there. I got some more. Y'all still with me on this? Okay, good. So when we do this work of transformation, there are 3 roles that people will play that always show up. The first is the holder, and I'm going to use a basket imagery here. These are people who hold certain issues and emotions. There are guardians of the status quo, the people who seek to maintain what is, or even to pull us a little bit further back. And there are prophetic voices, the people who speak the truth of what is now and what could be in the future. And I'm using a great drawing of Octavia Butler I found as a prophetic voice here. Most of us will play some of these roles at different points in our life in different places. I'm going to tell you briefly a story about another yearly meeting to illustrate how these 3 roles might show up. Several years ago, this yearly meeting was in the process of rewriting their faith and practice, and they were bringing the chapter on membership to sessions for approval. In that chapter, it contained a statement that if someone chose to be a member of a monthly meeting, they could not hold membership in any other denomination. Okay, not uncommon. It was read, there was a period of open discernment. An older Black friend in this very white yearly meeting stood up and spoke lovingly about her home meeting and that she often found spiritual nourishment, affirmation, and cultural connection at a local Black church that her monthly meeting could not provide for her. She asked if there might be space for her to hold membership among friends and this church. She was known in the yearly meeting to be a grounded, active friend and a beloved elder. What role might we associate with her? So, prophetic voice, yep. So she's speaking into a truth and reality that is not fully held or recognized in the group. She might also be a holder of certain issues or emotions too, right? She could be playing two of those roles. The next two friends to speak were both older white men who spoke at length about the need to only have membership in one faith denomination, that meetings can and do meet all the spiritual needs of their members, and that perhaps this friend who'd raised the issue should consider speaking to her ministry and council if she was not feeling fully nourished in her meeting. What role were these two friends holding? Guardians of the status quo. The next speaker was a young adult who had grown up in the yearly meeting and now lived outside its geographic bounds in a place with no Quaker meeting. Yet they returned every summer to faithfully staff the youth program. This friend talked about how connected they felt to the yearly meeting, how formative their time and young friends had been, and how there was no Quaker community near them, but they'd found some community and spiritual nourishment at a UU church. They asked if they might be a member of the yearly meeting and active in their local UU church. What role might we associate with this friend? Yeah, so again, maybe holder of a certain issue, maybe a prophetic voice, right? We can have some both and here. A friend from a multiracial family talked about the pain of having different members of their family holding membership in different faith communities, despite worshiping as a family in both places. What role might we associate with this friend? A holder, yeah. So I invite you to take a moment and think of a time, preferably recently, when you've held one of these roles in your family, your work, your Quaker meeting, or other space. When have you been a holder, a guardian of the status quo, or a prophetic voice? And I really invite you to do this reflection without shame or pride, but just recognition. We're not going to do sharing, so just a moment. The purpose of naming these roles is not to blame or cast accusations, but to understand the larger dynamics at play, and then consciously choose how we, each of us, want to show up. Recognizing the roles is the first part. Once we do that, we need to think about understanding, care, and group responsibility. And these are all incredibly Quaker things, right? We have discernment because we think understanding is important. We minister to each other because we believe in caring for each other. And we practice consensus because we know the group can hear and hold collectively what none of us can do individually. So as you are doing your business this week and nurturing your community, I invite you, when you think about the holders, who are the holders and what emotions or issues are they holding? Why are they holding them? And who is not holding that issue or emotion? What tending and care do these people need? We are all worthy of tending and care. And then what does the group need to hold or make space for that it hasn't been yet? When we see ourselves being a guardian of the status quo or sitting next to someone who's playing that role, who are they? What are they protecting? And what are they really protecting? In the story I just told you about the other yearly meeting and the friends saying that spiritual accountability needs to lie with a monthly meeting, they could be holding up a good practice of having clarity of spiritual accountability. That's an important thing to honor. We can also figure out new ways of doing that. If, on the other hand, they're saying the meeting meets all your spiritual needs and you're probably doing it wrong if you don't feel that way, they're holding up their own comfort and worldview. And that collectively, we do not need to protect. So we need to listen for what's really being asked to be protected. And then again, how do we tend to these people? Everyone is worthy of care. As a group, what does the group need to protect? And what does the group need to explicitly let go of? And please note the use of the word explicitly there. For our prophetic voices, who are the prophetic voices? What are they saying that needs to be heard, worked with, and acted upon? As Quakers, we love to hear the prophetic voices. We don't always want to do what they're asking us to do. And we love to give messages about when we heard them on NPR. How are the people who are holding prophetic voices being nurtured, eldered, and cared for? This next two are really important. When prophetic voices come from people who are regularly discredited among friends, how do we need to learn to listen through our biases to the truth they are speaking? So white friends, I'm looking at us. Older friends, I'm looking at us. Currently non-disabled friends, I'm looking at us. People with extra financial resources, I'm looking at us. People with traditional education who talk like this, I'm looking at us. And most importantly, how do we act on the wisdom of these voices? Please note, all my language around this is roles and people who are holding these roles. As friends, we know we are given different gifts at different times. They may stay with us for a week or two. They may stay for a lifetime. We all have choice in the roles we choose to play in community. So let's bring consciousness and choicefulness to how we are moving this week. This has been a lot that I just shared with you. So again, I'm going to invite you to turn to your conversation buddy in the room or go back to the same breakout group. And what if this framework has the most zing for you? And zing is a professional term that means energy, like, oh my gosh, yes, I've got all this stuff to say about it, or hold up, what? Or I do not agree with this woman from Boston. I don't know what she's talking about. All of that is zing. You can talk about any of that. Or where or how are you called to focus this week? So again, just 4 minutes to turn and talk with someone. Thank you. So I'm not going to ask for sharebacks this time, but rather I'm going to ask that you follow up, that you find your conversation partner sometime later this week or online, and you check in with them. What's moving in them over our time together? How are they noticing or actively choosing to be a part of this framework playing out in real time? How can you seek to understand and care for one another? What are the group responsibilities that need to be stepped into? As I move into my third offering, I want to, again, just invite a little stretch, a little breathe, a little wiggle move. We're almost done. We got just a few minutes left here. When I was a professional Quaker and running our Young Friends program, I would meet weekly with the other regional staff, and our worship sharing always centered around 3 questions. What is sucking the life, little L and big L, from me? Right? Sometimes this was the humanness of other friends, the challenges of working across 6 states. Sometimes it was the state of the world or the heartbreak of something that was affecting a friend. We then asked, what is giving me life, little L and big L? What's the joy? Where's the spark? Where's the excitement coming from? Where am I feeling nurtured and held? But these 2 questions were both precursors to the most important question. What is God's, Spirit's, the divine's invitation before me and us? And here's the thing. God doesn't want us burned out and fried, and God doesn't want us complacent. Spirit is always putting invitations before us that when we say yes, we will be given what we need to meet. And I want to be really clear that this is different from the total BS adage of God never gives you more than you can handle. Sometimes we get more than we can handle. This is about listening for the invitation and consciously saying yes to it. When I was 22 and a brand new teacher in a 1,000-kid middle school, I was the only teacher that was stopping homophobic language in the hallways. Kids noticed this. And so the third day of school, they asked me if I was gay, and I said yes. And as a result of that, I faced incredible violence. People tried to beat me up, slash my tires, cut my brakes, horrible, horrible things. Massachusetts in the 90s. And so many queer kids and parents in that school came and found me to have quiet conversations because they finally had a point of connection. Parents finally had someone they could talk to. And those sharings were immeasurable gifts. I also learned, as someone who had never been an only before, what it was to be an only in a space. And I cannot fathom how I would do the justice work I do today without that understanding and experience. It was not easy. It was not safe. It was not pleasant all the time. But Spirit gave me an invitation through a 12-year-old that I said yes to, and I was given what I needed to survive that time, to grow, to thrive, and to bring other people along on a journey of greater liberation. When we listen to Spirit and say yes to the invitation, we're given what we need to do the hard, incredible work of being faithful. As you do your business this week and tend to your community, what is the divine's invitation before you? And how do you say yes to it together and support each other? If you take nothing else away from this hour, please take that. I started this talk based on the name of a word. Sure. If you take nothing else from this hour, please take that. Our job as friends is to listen for what the divine is inviting us into, to say yes, and to support each other in doing that, particularly when it's hard and messy. Thank you, Walter. I started this talk and titled it based on a word from an Indigenous language that's not mine. And so I want to end this talk with an image of a worldview that comes from my ancestors, indigenous to the land where Fox and Fell lived. So this is the Celtic tree of life, where the branches fold down into the roots. And I want to bring you this image because before we were Christianized, before we were colonized, before we were colonizers, we understood that we lived in complete relationship with everything else in the world. We worshiped in and through the forests of our homelands and island nation. We had care and we understood seasonality, that in any moment, there are things that need to die and be let go of. There are things that need to be trimmed and pruned. There are things that need to be nurtured and brought forth. But just because something is ending doesn't mean it's not still part of the whole. Every one of you here this week is important and is critical to the life of your yearly meeting. Some of you are going to have to let go of the ways that you are used to doing things or feeling comfortable here. But you have your friends to support you, and you can do that. Some of you are going to need to be braver than you thought you might need to be this week and say and do the hard and challenging things. And your friends are here to support you and do that. All of us, if we go back far enough, come from a people who understand interconnection is the only way we can live and survive and thrive, that Spirit is with us, and that we need to feel our feelings fully and then be choiceful about how we act and move. I pray that your time here this week is full of love, of tenacious truth-telling, of radical actions, and of faithful care for each other. Thank you, friends.